This is Sybert signing into the Ladder Season 3 Best of 3 Finals. That is right, we're going to be pitting the two best players from Ladder Season 3 against each other for one final series to see who takes home absolutely everything. Whatever the prize money was, whatever the glory was, this is for it all. Or nearly it all. As we do have in the top left-hand corner, the green black hand. You know him. He is Technique. And in the bottom right-hand corner, the yellow black hand. That's right, you guessed it. It's a black hand mirror. We have Dynamic. Playing on Tournament Arena. What a map to kick things off with. And once again, not a lot of engineers coming out from Dynamic. Technique, on the other hand, he indeed did go for that barracks opener. He is going to be able to also overwhelm the single Cabal squad of Dynamic. Although this buggy from Dynamic is definitely going to be able to put the hurt on Technique. Kind of the other interesting thing is that Dynamic is placing his war factories in very much a position that is not beneficial to build harvesters, which is a bit indicative of a all-in. In this particular case, there's a sell-off of one of the refineries from Technique. He probably has a pretty good idea of what is heading his way, but does he have the forces here to actually stop it? He does have 4 bikes ready and waiting, and of course he's going to have to micro his heart out with his harvesters to keep them alive. 3-4 bikes here now for Dynamic. Can he actually break through the defenses? One Cabal squad can start putting the hurt out on some of these bikes if he really wants to. Dynamic has pushed through some of the forces of Technique, but Technique is going to be able to reinforce pretty regularly from that war factory. Hand of Nod now going to be coming down. Any rocket squads that come out, if they're able to stay alive against these buggies, they are definitely going to be giving some nice, much-needed DPS in stopping this attack. Just a couple of bikes left here for Dynamic. He definitely needs reinforcements to help him hold the line and keep the pressure up as Technique snipes down pretty much every single bike that Dynamic throws at him. And Dynamic still hasn't actually captured this tib spike in the south. A bit unfortunate there. Now rallying bikes up to the north. Going to be trying to push in from another angle, but that is all she wrote as Dynamic will most likely be dropping out of that game. I guess technically, we don't actually know. Maybe Technique saw something that he didn't like, but I'm pretty sure Dynamic was the one who fell out of that game. And the all-in doesn't always work, as you can see. That will do it for game number 1. Of course, that's just the start of this best of 3. Which way will it go in game number 2? Which is on Tournament Tower. Again, one of those maps that we don't see all that much. However, spawning on the left side as the green black hand, once again, this is Technique. While on the right side, mixing it up, plain yellow, Reaper 17, this is Dynamic. It is not going to be just straight up black hand mirrors for every single game. Although certainly not a big surprise to see the black hand mirror in game number 1. Dynamic, of course, looking to open up with a quick 1-0 with that bike all in. I would say bike buggy all in, but I think he only actually constructed one single buggy during the entirety of that game. We did actually see a little bit of Reaper 17 versus Scrin action in the semifinal with Dynamic versus Ironhide, although in that particular case, Ironhide was actually the Reaper 17. So we haven't actually seen Dynamic's Reaper 17 action, and we also haven't seen him play a Scrin faction, at least not in this particular, not in the series that I've been casting. We haven't seen Dynamic play a Scrin faction against Black Hand. So I'm definitely curious to see what he's got up his sleeve, what he has got planned for Technique. Well, the first Seeker tank not actually going to be doing all that great, considering he met with 2 bikes in the middle of the map, so he's not going to be able to put on that much pressure with just one Seeker tank, as most players don't really expect to not necessarily do that much with just a single Seeker tank. They are not particularly strong, and Black Hand I mean, even Cabals are reasonably good at dealing with Seeker tanks. 3 Harvesters now out on the line. Just a couple of bikes early on from Technique. Not really committing to early aggression. More of just wants to focus on those Harvesters and getting out his economy. Moving towards the middle, of course, limited number of actual expansion options on this particular map. It really does focus you towards some sort of base pushy engagement in the middle here. Artillery often become an important part in cracking your opponent's, hardcore turtle, because keeping these 2 fields secure is extremely important pretty much every matchup. Oh, Cabals. So incredibly annoying sometimes to deal with, as they are going to start to work away on that power plant. Scorpion tanks now going to be pumping on out. There's the second War Factory. There's the MCV cell. And Technique is like, you may thought I was going for an expansion, but I am not going for an expansion. And actually, Dynamic may actually end up realizing this in just a couple of moments. He doesn't technically see far enough, but once you see that one War Factory with a lot of units and no refinery, especially over the next, little while, once you see more and more that there's no refinery on the high ground, it really does tip you off to the huge amount of unit production that you're seeing from your opponent. Scorpion tanks going to be dealing with the logistics center, the tower in the middle, and of course sniping down that tower will take a little bit of time, so Technique is buying Dynamic a bit of time by focusing on that. There is going to be the stasis chamber going to be coming on down, locking out, what is that, like 6, 7 Scorpion tanks from actually engaging with this battle. And of course that does allow Dynamic to actually charge up his dev tanks with a bit of Tiberium, actually get some forces out on the map, and the single bike still kind of sneaking around the back of Dynamic's base, not actually able to do all that much. Scorpion tanks now going to have to deal with the dev tanks directly on the front lines, and of course that has bought so much time for Dynamic to do exactly what he wanted. Technique still can grab this Tib Spike in the south. He is going to be able to grab that if he wants. There's not actually a whole lot here for Dynamic to stop Technique from grabbing that Tib Spike. And Dynamic, of course, just pumping out dev tank after dev tank. And not a huge surprise to see a lot of times that we see Reaper 17. Sometimes that we do see Reaper 17, dev tanks. Most of the time that we see Reaper 17, I feel like dev tanks are a crucial part of their unit composition. And there are certainly more than a couple of players who have done quite well on just almost solely dev tank rushes, just getting out a lot of dev tanks really early and then putting on the pressure with them. Has Technique actually forgotten about that engineer and Tib Spike? He started killing off the Tib Spike and then he's like, I'll leave the Tib Spike. 1 Scorpion tank sniped, but 1 Scorpion tank is not quite enough, as Technique is going to be falling upon these dev tank rocks, and he's going to be able to snipe down 2 more, and a third will go down as he trades out against quite a few Scorpion tanks. That last Scorpion tank going down to a single dev tank shot. Technique definitely needs to make this attack work pretty much right here, right now. He's going to be out of economy relatively soon, and he hasn't thinned out the dev tank numbers like he would have wanted. He definitely can't really afford to be losing this War Factory. If he sells it off, then that's not super bad, but if it just gets sniped, then that is definitely about as bad of a situation as you could ask for. Bikes getting pushed away a little bit here. The assimilator may actually be forcing it to be sold off. It does get sniped down, which is definitely nice for Technique. He's starting to push forward. He's starting to clean up some of the dev tanks, but he's trading out so many units just against the sheer number of dev tanks that are here. Even a Corruptor making its way onto the front lines to help heal up these units. And in this particular case, Dynamic being so cost-effective with the number of dev tanks that he's got. I mean, when you've got this many dev tanks, it's not that hard to be super cost-effective. Technique has been defeated, and Dynamic evens up the score in this particular best of 3, 1-1, and takes us to the ace match for Ladder Season 3. Of course, with the all-in Technique on that very close map, very small map, he was hoping to get a bit more done, but once that stasis chamber went down, that was pretty much all the time that Dynamic needed to buy Technique, not able to make it happen. But of course, that puts both of these players in the position where they can simply win this series with one final strategy. Let's see what both of these guys decide to do in game number 3. Which takes us to Tournament Dust Bowl for one final meeting between these two players. In the north, the yellow, Black Hand. Can he continue on the momentum from his previous game? This is Dynamic. While in the south, as the green, Black Hand once again returning to the mirror, this is Technique. Both of these guys are very well known, and of course, with this being the official ladder season, 1.02 Plus was not out. We didn't have Predator's wonderful custom maps. We did not have a Tournament Dust Bowl that isn't a bit spike pokery. I don't know what the best way to put that is, but in this particular case, it's very important to win the spike poker. And in this case, it's going to be very difficult for Dynamic to win the spike poker, considering that he has literally half the number of units. His hallucinogenic grenades are the way to do it, but if he doesn't snipe the engineer, then they're not actually that valuable. Like, hallucinogenic grenades are great in certain situations, and they can allow you to potentially win a 2v1 like that, but if you don't actually kill your opponent's engineer and your opponent kills your engineer, then there's a bit of a problem there. That 500 credit investment this early on in the game, earning Dynamic nothing. Technique got his cash back. Technique got the spike. Will have that additional economy to propel him into the mid-game, but for now, Dynamic has to be thinking to himself, how do I gain back that advantage? That's actually a sell-off of a refinery, not something that you see very often this early on. I would expect a second, is he really not going? I guess he's just going to be sticking on that one war factory for now, just sticking on the one refinery for now, and Technique starting to put on the pressure, not going to be dropping a second war factory, not going to be even dropping additional power plants to try to sell off the MCV or anything like that. There goes one of the refineries, and Technique pushing in here. 4 bikes is going to be able to snipe down one of the harvesters, like literally a third of the economy of Dynamic at this point. And the bike will manage to escape. The Cabal squad's busy killing off other Cabal squads, which of course in this particular case does lend itself very well for Technique, because if he can keep more of his harvesters actually alive, then that is always, or more of his bikes alive, that is always fantastic. When he's sniping down the harvesters of his opponent on the left side, 4 bikes going to be regrouping, moving back in, going to be able to potentially snipe down another harvester, a 5th bike joining the fray. And of course, with these numbers, he will be able to trade out relatively well against, well, now that the Cabal squad is in the mix, he's going to have a harder time actually standing against the against the forces of Dynamic. Those Cabal squads just do pretty reasonable amounts of damage, or maybe unreasonable amounts of damage to bikes with that paper armor. You really just have to sneeze on them and they just about blow up. 4 harvesters out on the line of power plant, now going to be coming down. Technique extremely delayed in actually getting some of that infrastructure, probably just waiting to see if Dynamic decided to go super hardcore all in or anything like this. And in this particular case, he held off on actually rebuilding that refinery until he was safe enough. He had enough bikes out, and of course he had put a bit of pressure out on Dynamic. We've got double war factory. Is this power plant going to be signaling an MCV cell? It's very possible, as Technique gets rid of his MCV, gets that bit of a cash boost, and he even has a couple of buggies just running around the map looking for infantry to kill. They at least get a Cabal squad. They may have also got an engineer, which would have been super annoying for Dynamic if he had ended up rebuilding an engineer and then lost that as well. 1,000 credits. I mean, 500 credits is bad enough at this point, but 1,000 would be that much worse, as it delays so much of your build. Quite a few bikes going to be moving in, and of course the buggy's going to be tanking the first couple of shots, and that could be all she wrote, as Dynamic has virtually nothing left, sells his MCV, drops another war factory, but actually with only 2 power plants, I'm pretty sure he is going to be on low power mode, which means he doesn't have anything, and Dynamic will be dropping out of the finals. 1-2 to Technique, the absolute king of this tournament. As you can see there, Technique doesn't need a whole lot to win a series, and it's unfortunate that this was only a best of 3. I really would have loved to see a best of 7 from these guys. Even a best of 5 would have been better, but in this particular case, Technique able to take Ladder Season 3 with the 2-1 over Dynamic. And definitely some top-tier players, and we have seen better finals than that, and we have definitely seen some worse finals than that since Ladder Season 3. And that will do it. Some definitely historic games for Kane's Wrath. However, I have now cast them, so I can check that box off. That much more is complete. Thank you all very much for watching, and of course, I hope you guys enjoyed it. This little series of looking back. However, it's time for it to end as Technique walks away the victor. This is Sybert, signing out.